All right, so let's go, still staying with referential integrity. We're talking about constraints now. Here's that primary key constraint, and I just mentioned this a little bit already, kind of jumping ahead. Primary key is on one or more columns. It's required to provide the uniqueness in a row, in a table. That helps enforce the referential integrity. Often it'll be referred to from another table using a foreign key, but a primary key is an attribute or a set of attributes that uniquely identifies that row. So if it's a set of attributes, it's that composite primary key that we talked about. A table can only have one primary key on it. Not one column, but one primary key that could be a single column or multiple column. And a column that participates in this composite primary key or individual primary key cannot allow null values, which means content has to be added there. So I can't just skip by when I'm adding content. So if you're going to make a column part of a primary key constraint, then it requires content being added to that. And you can enforce that when you're creating the columns, and we'll see that a little bit later on. So the primary key is used for that. The foreign key is used to reference that content. So the foreign key is a column or a combination of columns. If the primary key uses two columns like we did with the license number and the state code, well, the foreign key referencing that has to use that to mention to reference it as well. So it references it as a unique constraint that's created over there for that primary key. Unlike a primary key, a foreign key can have null values. So be careful on how those two are implemented, because they're implemented slightly different. But you're going to see that a primary key is going to be accessed by the reference by a foreign key. So it's going to allow us to enforce that referential or data integrity by making sure that we have valid content when we're adding our content into our tables. So this is the diagram we saw earlier, and what I did, all we've done here is we introduced earlier on that we had the foreign key, which are the blue items, and we had the primary key, which are the red items. So now what happens is when I add a new product into the products table over here, when I type in the value for product subcategory ID, it's going to jump over to the products subcategory table and make sure that this foreign key references a primary key here. Now inside of this table, it's like, oh, by the way, this is a subcategory. If I'm going to when I add an item to this product subcategory, it needs to make sure there's a major category, a top category. So it's going to check this table down here. So see how there's all sorts of cross-checking that's going on as I'm adding content. When I add an item here, it's going to double check to make sure that's a valid item here. When I add an item here, it's going to make sure it's a valid item here. This product category ID here is a foreign key that references the product category ID in the product category table. So all this cross-checking is making sure that when I'm adding this content, it's all valid content that I'm adding, and these tables are tied together. The relationship is built between these tables using these keys.
Can we talk through that one more time?
Sure.
Let's go look at that slide. So we have 3 tables. So I'm going to go back to your grocery store example here for a minute.
Sure.
We've got a spreadsheet full of all the products with categories and subcategories, and it's in one thing.
Right.
And I went through the exercise of denormalizing my data, which led me to creating these 3 tables. Yeah. And then with the referential integrity concepts, there are these specific relationships that include primary keys and foreign keys in these tables that kind of manage the relationships between these tables.
Correct.
Right? So
Perfect.
let's just go, I'm going to give you one example, and I'm going to try and talk through this. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
All right.
So in my grocery store, we sell strawberries.
Okay.
And so in this example, and you've got a whole bunch of columns, I'm not going to worry too much about them, but strawberry is the product. It's got some product ID, which is unique, and I can see there's a key next to it. So that's the primary key in the product table is a product ID. So we'll just say strawberry is number 1.
Okay.
Product ID 1, name is strawberry. It's got some product number that's involved in my inventory system. Its color is typically red. Those kinds of things exist about the product strawberry.
Right.
And then the product category, which is on the right side of the slide at the bottom, we're going to say that there's a product category called produce.
Nice.
Right? And the name is produce. And it will have a product category ID of, I don't know, maybe produce is 25.
Okay.
Right? So the subcategory of produce for my strawberry is going to be fruit
Right.
or berries or something like that, right?
Fruit sounds good. Yeah.
Fruit, we'll call
I think
it fruit.
strawberry's a fruit. I don't know.
Strawberry is a fruit and
It's
a berry.
tomatoes that weird one, isn't it?
I get confused
Tomato,
about
I
that.
think it's a fruit, and I think it's a vegetable.
We're going down a
Anyways,
hole
we'll
I
go
don't
with
want to go
strawberries.
into. Yeah.
Okay, we'll stay with
So, subcategory of fruit has its own primary key for fruit, but then has a foreign key relationship to the category, which is produce.
Correct.
And then back on my product side, when I list the category, the subcategory specifically there of fruit, it's going to have a foreign key over to the primary key in the product subcategory table.
Exactly right.
So I've got this list of stuff that includes all of my products, and I started with a spreadsheet, but if I want to get it into a database, I have to denormalize it, which means I need to think about all the redundant data and how to simplify it down. And then I have to figure out how to have relationships between these tables that include primary keys and foreign keys so that I can keep my integrity of my data all together so that I
Exactly.
can uniquely reference things like the category and subcategory and the product name and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Do I have it? Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Perfect explanation.
Okay.
Definitely, yeah. So those guys make sure the data is being added is valid data. That's good. That's what we want to make sure. Again, we've taken our denormalized table, our unnormalized table. We've normalized it. It requires some additional tables. We got to get those tables to talk to each other. They need relationships in the primary key and foreign key.
And I can start to
create that.
see where we're going now because in my spreadsheet, I have fruit listed in one column for everything that has a row that is a fruit.
Right.
So I've got strawberries and bananas and everything just says fruit.
Right.
But I don't have any idea how many categories I have because fruit is listed 25 times and,
Exactly.
and crackers is listed 25 times and I don't know. But if I do it this way and I break my data up in these tables, then I can just look at how many categories I have because it's only listed one time
Right.
in the category table.
That's back to normalization where we got rid of
I've
the
eliminated that
redundant data.
redundant
Yeah,
data.
absolutely
Okay,
perfect.
I can
Really
totally
good.
see how this is going to be a lot easier for me to use.
Yeah, and we start retrieving this content in another module too. The way we can slice and dice and generate information compared to our spreadsheets is going to be phenomenal.
Well, now I'm really curious how many genres of music I have in my collection, and I want to know how many records I have by a particular band.
Yeah, yeah.
And right now in my spreadsheet, it's really hard to get that kind of
Right.
information out.
Yeah, you can filter, you can sort it and stuff.
Yeah, but then I have
get a good
to
report.
count each row.
Exactly.
It's super
yeah,
complicated.
definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so hopefully that helps clear up the idea of taking a table, normalizing it using a third normal form, taking the table, normalizing it, and now, okay, we've got all these tables. I got to get those tables to talk to each other. So we use primary keys and foreign keys to create relationships between those tables so they can talk to each other. And I'm able to validate content, and I'm able to see, you'll see shortly, to be able to retrieve content using table content that's stored or data that's stored in multiple tables. I'll be able to retrieve that content. So we're going to be able to go in and move that. All right. Do we want to try to do a little ad hoc
Let's do it.
library?
I think we should.
Want to
Let's
run
go.
with this?
I think we should work on my CD library
All right.
right now.
Okay, let's do this. So I need to come out of this screen so I can go into one of these deals here.
So in this case, you're going to be my database administrator. I'm
Okay.
going to tell you about my data, and I'm going to try and guess what sort of normalized form and things
Yeah.
I need to do. But let's see if
We're
we
going
can.
to do CDs, you said, right?
We're going to do the CD library, and let's see if we can create just the basic structures that we need for what I think the tables are going to become
Okay.
later on.
Okay.
And I'll talk you through, sort of like the grocery store example. But I have this huge spreadsheet, and it's got all of the CDs that I've got, all the albums.
Okay.
Right? So I need, and it's got a whole bunch of columns in it, like artist and genre and the date that I got it.
Right.
And like, there's probably 25 because I keep track of a variety of different ways that I like to sort them.
Cool.
So, but let's just start with those three. It sounds like now we're talking about I need something to manage the CDs, but I don't want the artist listed redundantly, right? Because now that I know about normalization, I want to eliminate the redundancy.
Right.
So I probably need something to track artist.
Okay, so let's add a table here. So we're going
Let's
to
start with the first one. Let's just start with the CD.
So we'll add a table. I'm just going to throw square. All I do is square boxes here. Let's get some
Got
fill
it.
factor on it for some reason. Let me get rid of no fill here. All right.
This is sort of the fundamentals of database design using PowerPoint.
Yeah, pretty much exactly.
Right, which we don't
There are
necessarily
better ways
recommend.
to do this, but
Right. There are lots of tools actually that do this. In fact, Visio has some great designers for doing relationship modeling and things like that. But
So this
we're going
one's
to
gonna-
stick simple here.
yeah, we're going to just What we're going to call this one? This first table is what?
I think we can call this CDs.
CDs. Okay.
Although nobody buys CDs anymore, right? It's
I know.
all digital, so maybe we should call it albums.
There you go. That's that's
Should
a
we call it
universal
albums?
name.
Let's call it albums.
Albums. Okay, good.
That way we're modern and ready for
Yeah, now it sounds
future
cooler. Even,
media
definitely.
changes going
sounds
forward.
better that way. So now we're going to go ahead and do this. We're going to have to add another table because you said you wanted to.
Yeah, I think the question that I want to answer about my data is how many categories or how many genres
Okay.
do I have? So I think I can kind of detect that since an album has a genre, and one of the things that I want to learn is how many genres I have. I think one of the possible things that we're going to need here is a genre table.
All right. Let's see here. I can't get this guy here.
Can you actually make that bigger? Do you want to just maximize your PowerPoint window for
sure.
me?
Well, let me do that.
That'd be
Yes,
great.
it will.
Maybe you can
Okay.
make that slide thing smaller too, and we get these boxes a little bigger.
Gotcha. Slide that. How about that?
Now I can see it. Good, thanks.
Nice.
Yep.
Good call. Look good
Yep.
to me. It's sitting right in front of me.
Right.
Get this centered.
So that's going to be albums, and then that one's probably going to be genres.
All right, I gotta figure out here. I get this fill out of this thing here. Fill.
This is really just a chance for you to demonstrate your
My,
PowerPoint
my
prowess
lack of skills in PowerPoint.
for all posterity.
All right, so and here we're gonna add. This is gonna be.
I think you just click and type.
All right.
Just click the box to select it,
There
and
it
just start
goes.
typing. That's going to be genre. Except now I think you've got white text on a white background.
Yeah. You can't see that? Really? I can see that perfectly clear. I don't know what the
Because
problem
it was
is.
originally blue and you made it white, and now. There you go. Okay, great. So that's genre. The other one is album. And then I want one more for artist.
Oh yeah.
Because I think it'd be really interesting to figure out how many albums I have from a particular artist.
Who's your favorite artist? Do you have a favorite? Really? So many nowadays.
You know what? I've been a drummer for as long as I can remember walking. So most of my favorite bands have really awesome drummers. The last band I saw live was the Dave Matthews Band. How's that? Is
Oh,
that a good
nice.
answer?
That's
And
good.
I have a whole bunch of his records in my collection, so
Okay.
that might be our example.
All right, and this is gonna be artist.
And that's going to be artist. So I've got this spreadsheet. It's got all my albums in it. I've got a whole bunch of metadata, including artist and genre and the date that I acquired it. But now with normalization, I can break those things down into these tables so that I can look things up like the list of artists, the list of genres. But now we have to do the relationship between them. So
right.
let's just type in these boxes then. I need primary key for everything,
Right.
right? So that I can give it a unique identity. So just click in the box, and what would we call the primary key for the album table? Probably like album ID.
I would say
right?
album
Does
ID
that
would
work?
be the easiest one. I don't know why it keeps defaulting to white text.
It's because we tricked you and you changed the color of the box the first time, but that's fine. Good. So that's going to be album ID. And that's my primary key for that table. Can you just maybe put in parentheses, that's primary? Yeah, that's great. So album ID is over there. And then we probably need primary keys for the other ones also, right?
Yeah.
Just
So-
put it after artist. Just hit return there.
It's let me jump back in here.
There you go.
And it there. Oh. Yeah. See, this guy here doesn't like.
You need to get your insertion point on it.
There it goes.
There you go.
Artist. Okay. This PK is going to be.
Artist ID probably, right?
Sounds good.
I'm sensing a theme here. I think we're going to probably talk about some naming conventions and stuff like that in the
Yeah.
next module.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
just conceptually here, I have a primary key there, and then I've got another one there for genre. I'm going to guess this is going to be genre ID.
That looks consistent to me. Did I spell that correctly? I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, good.
It's good enough for the example anyway.
Yeah.
So primary keys gives us unique identity for all these things, but now I need to have a relationship between them so that I actually can do the lookup things that I want, like how many albums do I have that are in the jazz genre?
Right.
Right. So how would I make a relationship between genre and album?
So we need album ID to be able to access genre to check for that.
Album ID so I can check for genre. And conversely, I probably want a genre ID in my album table.
Correct.
Right?
So I can get typed into here.
So which one do I want? That's actually a really good question. Do I want an album ID in my genre, or do I want a genre ID in my album?
You want genre ID and as a foreign key in albums. That's
Okay.
going to reference the primary key in the genre table.
Got it.
Okay.
So that becomes a foreign key in the album table.
Right.
And then we don't have to draw the lines between them like
Yeah,
you
but
showed
these
us
would
on the
talk
other
to each
slide.
other, yeah.
But the genre ID in the album table is the same genre ID. So if I have Dave Matthews Band live at the Gorge, which is complicated because it's a 3 CD album. We'll call it one album. We're not going to go there right
Yeah.
now. How many CDs are in that thing? But if I go to the Dave Matthews Band album, then it'll have a genre of rock, but it'll have a genre ID in the album table, and the genre ID will map to the genre name in the genre table,
Correct.
so that I can say, how many albums do I have that are rock? I can look up by rock, and I can find Dave Matthews. Is that roughly what's going on here?
Yeah, somebody actually add a name here. So
Oh yeah, genre name is probably a good idea.
yeah.
So we don't have to do the whole data model,
Yeah, but
and I
just-
think we've got a couple of examples now.
Yeah.
But tie in that first example of that giant spreadsheet. We've got products, we've got categories, now we've got our CD library, we've got albums and genres and artists. And I imagine just to complete this thought, we'd have a foreign key in the album table that is the artist, so that not only can I look up my albums by genre, but I could look them up by artist.
Exactly. We'll
So
add that
suddenly
right
my
there.
complicated spreadsheet that has, however many hundred rows in it becomes broken down in a normalized relational model with the referential integrity so that I can look things up between them in a really simple way. And we're just totally foreshadowing where we're headed in modules 3 and 4, where we're going to talk about how you actually create this in a database. Look at you trying to draw the lines in PowerPoint. That's very adventurous
Yeah,
of you.
so, yeah, I know.
I
Especially
think
because
that's
I
a
can't get
slippery
typing
slope,
to work. You know.
right? So we're in module 3. We're going to talk about how you actually create these in a database. We're going to use SQL Server as our example.
Correct.
And then in module 4, we're finally going to get to the query fundamentals about how I can do the lookups
Yeah.
and do really cool stuff using the T-SQL language.
Yeah, and that's cool. I think that's going to be the
use
cool
the
part
data.
where this is where it really comes together. Like you're used to being in your Excel spreadsheet. It's like I've got limited functionality. By creating this and doing this, performance data modeling, the normalization process, creating these tables, creating the relationships between these tables. When you start looking at some of the complex select statements, not real complex, but some of the slightly advanced select statements, you're going to see the power of why you would want to do this, especially if you have lots of rows of content.
Let's go on to the summary slide, and then I think we'll wrap up, and
All right.
we'll get on to module 3.
So we talked about normalization. We talked about, remember, there's 5 forms. And we talked about 5 normal forms for that. Let me go big screen here. There we go. And first one, second one, and third one. We're worried about those the most. That's going to give you, you're going to eliminate repeating groups, eliminate redundant data, and it's going to eliminate any content that's in a table that's not relevant, has to be directly associated with that key. So we're going to do that first. We're not going to worry about the 4th and 5th normal form. Referential integrity, we talked about that. That's what ensures the data that we're adding is valid. We saw that with the cross-checking. When I add content, when I add an album ID, for instance, it goes out to make sure it's a valid album ID. Or if we go back to the student, it goes out to make sure we have a valid student or we have a valid advisor. Tools we can use for referential integrity. We showed you a quick demonstration. Ad hoc kind of worked okay. Primary key and foreign key constraints. Again, if you want uniqueness in other columns besides the primary key, you can use a unique constraint. And we'll look at indexes a little bit more down the road. And we just did a brief explanation of triggers, just so you know you have that option that's out there. This is a brief explanation of those different types of constraints that we have available or ways for us to enforce referential integrity. And we demoed primary key, foreign key. Unique constraints will probably be very popular when you're trying to enforce uniqueness and you've already used your primary key for a table. And a unique index is going to be created for you when you create a unique constraint. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about indexes, not a whole lot about that. And then we introduce the idea of triggers can be actually used for kind of introducing some code that might help with enforcing referential integrity by ensuring that someone, oh, did you really mean to delete this particular item? So you can actually use a trigger for that as well. So what we looked at here was more conceptual. We looked at the idea of normalization. We talked about that. We looked at introducing constraints. And we attempted to draw out a diagram on how you might take your album collection, I like that better than just CD or DVDs, and use something like a database product like SQL Server or even Access to take it out of the spreadsheet and give you that extra flexibility and start introducing the idea of relational databases and tables within those databases. So we'll be back and we're going to continue on with our conversation in just a little bit. And we'll continue on and continue discussing what we're going to do and how we're going to really utilize the options of the referential integrity that we've just introduced. And we're going to get more hands-on with what we can do in the upcoming
Going to finally
courses.
create a database?
Yeah, we're going to start creating some stuff
Fantastic.
now that we've been kind of setting up with how we want to do it. We're going to dig in and kind of roll up our sleeves and start doing it.